Okay, I'm going to try to get through the rest of this video quickly because I've been running my mouth a little bit here and speaking a little too long, so I'm going to try to power through this so that the video doesn't run quite so long. All right, by far, the biggest mistake that good players, bad players, no-limit players trying to play limit, and everyone else in between, the biggest mistake everyone makes is playing too loose before the flop. And that's, if people just played tighter pre-flop, a lot of their leaks and limit hold'em would be solved. And so what do I mean by playing too loose? Well, if you're playing under the gun, you should have a very strong hand, as I'm listing here. A top 7% hand, a decent pair or a decent ace, king, queen suited, and that's pretty much it. If you're under the gun in a 6-max game, the low jack, as it's called these days, you can open up to about 15% of your hands, which of course is still very tight, but includes a lot of suited aces, most pairs, and decent kings, and a couple of bigger suited connectors. By the time it folds to you on the button, you can now open up and play 50% of your hands, and you can see my hand recommendations here. These aren't hard and fast rules, but these are, again, just guidelines. If you're somewhere near these guidelines, you're probably doing okay. But you really shouldn't get too far away from these guidelines. For example, if you try to play even like 25% of your hands under the gun in the 6-max limit hold'em game, or 60 or 65% of your hands in the button, you almost certainly would do better by playing tighter than that. So if you play very well, you can play a little bit looser than this, but really playing loose is the number one mistake people make. And it's because of everything I just said in the last 3 slides, which is the kind of hands that you need to be able to raise for value on the later streets are very big hands. And it's hard to make those very big hands with a lot of these lousy preflop hands that we're talking about. It just is not going to come up as often as if you're playing the hands that can make much bigger top kind of hands, top 2, top set, bigger ends of the straights, those kinds of hands. Those are the ones that you're going to be able to put in multiple bets with. And so because of that problem, you're going to end up with just too many showdown kind of hands in your range if you play too loose pre-flop. And also, you can't get people to fold their non-nut hands in limit hold'em the way you can in no limit. In no limit, if you can apply enough pressure after the flop, you can talk someone into folding just about anything that's not the nuts. But in limit, it's just people are going to call you down with a pair, and so you have to have a pair with a better kicker. And if you find yourself getting out kicked a lot in limit hold'em, it's just a surefire sign that you're playing too loose before the flop. If you're losing too many showdowns, same thing. If you're finding yourself in too many post-flop situations where you don't know what to do, if you feel like you never have anything, all of these problems are generally solved by playing tighter before the flop. All right, running down the other ones really quickly. The other common mistakes, as opposed to playing too loose pre-flop, some people play too tight post-flop. They don't do that part of the wall, the second part, where they call down with pretty much any pair or any decent showdown hand. They decide that their opponent's being aggressive, and because they know they're value betting some huge percentage at the time, 80 or 90%, they don't want to get stubborn and the way you're supposed to and call down with any pair. A lot of times you're going to play in limit hold'em sessions and you're going to find yourself calling down over and over again and constantly getting shown a better hand, and it's really frustrating. And part of that frustration can manifest itself by having you decide to fold some of those hands. But that's the worst thing you can do, because if you just get bluffed out of one of those pots, that's far worse than calling down 4 or 5 or 6 of them really in a row. Playing too aggressive, and by that I mean instead of taking the wall and doing the passive part of it, I mean putting in too much money with hands that really should just be going to showdown and calling down and seeing what develops. So basically, I sometimes see otherwise decent players putting in 3 bets and 4 bets on a jack 9 flop with pocket deuces, and it's just so much simpler to lose less when you're behind and win more when you're ahead, really, too, by just playing passively with those deuces and either inducing bluffs all the way down or escaping for the minimum when you're beat. And this is a common move by people who some think they're going to get folds in limit hold'em. They're just not going to get. I mean, you're not going to get someone who has the kind of outs that you're supposed to have when they make an aggressive play in limit to then fold somewhere later on. So the only folds you're going to get are going to be on the river when you actually have the best hand, and what good is that? So playing aggressive and not capturing as much value as you should from your mediocre hands is another common limit mistake. And then the opposite of that, playing too passively. And this goes with the next one, which is missing value bets. This is not gaining that extra bet on the river with 3rd and 4th pair. A huge mistake for most players. And also not getting in as much money with really big draws in a big multi-way pot on the flop. And combining all of these into one thing, fancy play syndrome, deviating from your normal course of action without having a good reason for it. Basically, almost every mistake in Limit Hold'em can be attributed to this, at least from good players. As they kind of overthink the situation. They say, yeah, I know I'm supposed to just flat the turn with this hand, but I was thinking if I raise this turn and then I'll do this. And the problem is sometimes it works out, because sometimes your opponent, of course, has a weak hand and folds the turn, or he calls the raise in the turn and then check calls the river, and it's, you make an extra bet. The problem is, in the long term, a lot of these plays end up costing you 2 or 3 bets when your opponent then raises you back, or you decide to make a really tight fold in the river because you think you have this great read and you're just wrong. Basically, anytime you kind of deviate from the plan, you shouldn't do it unless you're a really good player with a lot of experience and know what you're doing and have seen the situation a million times.